So Ray, in the few minutes we have here, I guess I need to ask you our question that we're asking everyone to answer here. And you've been doing this for a very long time, talking about it, writing about it. So what are your greatest hopes and greatest fears about artificial intelligence?
Well, I've written about 3 overlapping revolutions, sometimes goes by the letters G and R: genetics, which is biotechnology, N, nanotechnology, and R, robotics, which is artificial intelligence. The biotechnology revolution is here. It was enabled by the Genome Project. That was a perfect exponential. These technologies are now 1,000 times more powerful than they were a decade ago when the Genome Project was completed. And we see now a trickle of actual clinical applications. We can now fix a broken heart, not yet from romance. That'll take some advances in virtual reality. But from a heart attack, you can now rejuvenate the heart. That was never possible before. And there's many other applications. Nanotechnology is the next revolution, being able to put small devices inside the body and augment the immune system. Ultimately, AI is going to transform the world. It's already beginning to. This advance that you heard about in terms of deep learning. As we go from one level to the next, issues get more abstract. So at the first level, I can tell that that's a straight line. A challenge to AI just recently, like 5, 6 years ago, is, well, AI can't even tell the difference between a dog and a cat. Well, the essence of a dog and a cat is at the 15th layer. We couldn't go beyond 3 or 4 levels in a neural net because of a mathematical problem. The information would disintegrate. We figured out actually how to preserve it. Now we can go to a very large number of levels. Now programs can tell the difference between a dog and a cat in 10,000 other categories, and as you heard, do a better job than humans in that issue and lots of other areas. One weakness, though, is these deep neural nets require a lot of data. They need billions of examples. Now, at Google, one of the reasons I'm there is we have billions of examples of dogs and cats and lots of other things. But there's lots of things we don't have a lot of information on. Humans can learn from a small number of examples. You know, you hear something from your girlfriend or your boss once or twice, you'll actually learn that. At least some people do. So I have a thesis on a somewhat different model than deep neural nets that can learn from a small number of examples. That's how I wrote a book on that, and Larry Page liked it, and that's how I ended up at Google. It was my first job. I think AI...
That's your first job?
For a company I didn't start myself.
Okay, I was going to say. Yeah.
So AI, there's been this controversy recently. Hawking just woke up that, oh my God, you know, AI could destroy the world. You know, just recently, people saying, AI is never going to work. And now they're saying, oh my God, AI is going to work. And what is that going to mean for the world? I've been involved in this debate, whether AI is going to be destructive or not. I think we have one of the points I make is we have a moral imperative to continue, because as you heard, we're using AI to diagnose disease and cure disease and alleviate poverty and clean up the environment, all worthwhile objectives. We still have a lot of suffering in the world. We have ways of keeping these technologies safe. The one technology that already has an existential risk is biotechnology. Same technology we're using to reprogram this outdated software in our bodies away from disease and away from aging could also be used by a bioterrorist to reprogram a biological virus to be destructive. We had over 30 years ago, we had a conference, the Asilomar conference, to talk about how do we keep it safe. The Asilomar guidelines have actually kept it safe for over 30 years. It doesn't mean we can cross it off our concern list, but it's a good model for how to do that. The biggest concern are these existential risks. I mean, we've seen those existential risks in dystopian futurist movies. Another reason that I take comfort in the future is these movies usually have the AI versus the humans in control, fighting for control of the world. We don't have 1 or 2 AIs in the world. We have 2 billion AIs. There'll be 5 or 6 billion smartphones in a few years. Those are all AIs. We're deeply integrated already with this technology. And it is basically enhancing all of us already, and will become more intimately integrated with it in the future. But that's the biggest worry, is that it will be destructive. Fire kept us warm, cooked our food, but also burned down our houses. These new technologies are that much more powerful, but we do have a moral imperative to continue. It ultimately will overcome disease and radically extend longevity and clean up the environment and address age-old problems of humanity.
So it's interesting because a lot of people think of you as being this ultimate optimist. And in fact, you are in many ways. But you also do talk about some of the downsides of this, right?
Well, you have to be an optimist to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
But on the other hand, I was the first to write about these downsides. I wrote extensively about them in 1999, The Age of Spiritual Machines. Bill Joy based his dystopian cover story in Wired magazine, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us, based on that book. I wrote extensively in The Singularity is Near. Chapter 8 is the deeply intertwined promise versus peril of GNR. And you go through three phases, really, in addressing these revolutionary, exponentially growing information technologies. One is, ecstasy at the potential to solve these age-old problems, and then despair at the potential destructive power of these technologies. And ultimately, I think the third phase where you need to end up is understanding that is the nature of being human, is to make progress and to overcome problems. And there
sort
are
of a
risks.
happy medium, if you will.
There's a risk in doing that. So I think Hawking and Musk and even Gates have suddenly woken up. Oh my God, AI could be destructive. But we've always known that.
Yeah. So tell us what you're doing at Google. I mean, this is a little bit of a mystery to some of us. Like you said, you've only worked for yourself, basically, and suddenly...
Well, I had a thesis on how the brain worked. I described it actually 50 years ago when I was 14 as a series of modules. Each could recognize a pattern. They were organized in a hierarchy. We created that hierarchy with our own thinking. I won a science contest and met President Johnson and proceeded to think about this for 50 more years. And then in 2012, wrote a book, How to Create a Mind, that has the same thesis, only now we have an explosion of neuroscience evidence to support that idea. I gave an early version to Larry Page. He liked it. So we struck a deal and started a few months later to develop this particular thesis, which I think attempts to address this issue that is a problem with deep neural nets, and that they're great. They can be better than humans if you have 10 billion examples to learn from. But we need to learn the way humans do from a small number of examples. Yeah. And principally, I'm applying this. I have a group to understanding natural language. So we can, instead of doing search on keywords, which works great, but to actually have the search engines and all these other applications, language translation, actually read documents and understand them for meaning. Watson does that to some extent. It doesn't actually read them as well as you or I, but it has good Bayesian reasoning and can, it might read one document and conclude, there's a 56% chance that Barack Obama's president of the United States. You could read that, and if you didn't happen to know that, conclude there's a 98% chance. You did a better job reading that document, but it makes up for that by reading more documents. So that's what we're doing at Google. We can read not quite as well as humans yet. We'll do that as well as humans by 2029. That's a key date when computers will pass the Turing test. But they can make up for their weak reading by reading more documents. So we're understanding that. We're trying to understand natural language.
You, just on the last minute or two here, you took some issue with the survey that we sent out. And let's talk about that for a second. About you were talking about the, I guess, enhanced versus post-enhanced humans, and I was wondering what you thought of the survey because you actually took it.
Well, I thought it was a good, interesting survey. It was a little ambiguous because would you rather have a human or an AI diagnose you or treat you or be your psychiatrist? So first of all, it depends on when this AI will exist, because by after 2029, it really will have the full depth and breadth of human intelligence, in my view. And then if you talk about humans, are you talking about humans enhanced with AI or unenhanced humans? So, it's going to be a different story at different points in time. I think just as soon as AIs achieve and exceed human intelligence, which is 2029, in the early 2030s, we'll be putting these devices inside our brain, connecting our neocortex to the cloud. So instead of only having 300 million neocortical modules, we'll have an unlimited number in the cloud. I mean, this device can multiply itself 1,000,000-fold by being connected wirelessly and seamlessly to the cloud. We can't do that directly from our brains yet. So I'm walking along, I look up and go, oh, there's Larry Page. It's coming my way. I better think of something clever to say. I've got 2 seconds. My 300 million neocortical modules isn't going to cut it. I need 1 billion for 2 seconds. I'll be able to access that in the cloud, and and I'll be funnier and smarter. We'll all be more musical, sexier.
What if it tells you to something stupid? And Larry goes, what?
Well, we're not going to use it until it's really clever and
So
funny.
note to self, wait until the AI is ready before I use it to talk to Larry Page. Okay. Final question. Is that an Apple Watch or?
It's a Google Watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Ray. I really appreciate it.